Hi, I'm Tim. Welcome to Watchbox, and thanks for logging on. If you love what you see here, everything is for sale. Reach out to me, tmosso at thewatchbox.com, for pricing information about any watch on this show. We're always looking to build inventory. We sell what we buy, and we buy what we sell. Trade? Sell us a watch, sell us an entire collection. We make it easy, we pay cash, we pay fast, we make the whole process seamless. And again, no upper limit on value paid. We will buy $3 million worth of your collection straight up. To buy, trade, or sell, reach out to me, tmosso at thewatchbox.com. All right, let's get started with something I've never seen before. The Vacheron Constantin Overseas brown dial. Now this came out in 2016 with the third generation Overseas series, and the brown dial model was discontinued across all its variants, chronograph, self-winding, etc. in early 2018, and while it was in production, it was the least ordered version. There were a lot of black dials, silver dials, and blue dials, but very few people ordered this bewitching metallic brown, meaning it had a short production run and a low take rate. That is a recipe for collectability. But this is the first one I've seen, and I've been doing this since the model came out in 2016. Where have they been? Scarce. That's where they've been. The watch is lovely. 41 millimeters in diameter in steel. You can see that it's got a little bit of rigidity across the wrist, so I'm going to put it on my wrist and give you a relative sizing. An easy watch to wear on the bracelet, but easier to wear on the strap. So I think you could wear this watch on the bracelet down to a 15 centimeter circumference wrist, but the watch comes with two straps, one brown alligator leather, one brown rubber. When you put the watch on those straps, it wears smaller. So you could wear this watch on a 14 centimeter circumference wrist if you put it on one of the straps. And it's easy to put the watch on the strap. You can also see it's very flat. It's just about 11 millimeters thick, easily sliding underneath the cuff. Let me show you why it's so easy to put this on the strap. We have a quick release system for the straps and the bracelet. Just like a car seat belt buckle, it pops off and it snaps right back into place. And if you do prefer to wear the bracelet, it's going to be an easy bracelet to size. Look at all these removable links. On both sides of the bracelet, every single individual link is removable. And then we'll take a quick look at each one of the micro adjustments built into the bracelet, one on each side of the clasp, and you can see 1.5 millimeters of sleeved friction fit micro adjustment on each side, and it's a beautifully finished bracelet. You can see the sculpting and polish and satin, the faceting, even the inner faces of the links have been faceted and polished. Not easy to do. There's a rolled bevel on the shoulder of the links. They're polished outboard, satinated across the top. We've got that Maltese cross motif that runs all the way down, repeating across the center links. The same is used for the bezel. You can see on the dial as well as on the crown, as well as on the clasp itself. The Maltese cross is the emblem of the brand. The dial is exquisite. We have a metallic brown sunburst, and then we have a couple of concentric radial satinations, or I should say not radial, but circumferential satinations for the flange and then the minutes track. White gold hands, white gold indices, white gold frame for the date and logo. These will not tarnish or oxidize over time. Plenty of luminescence. This is a real sports watch with a screw down crown. It's 150 meters water resistant. We'll pop off that bracelet to better see the movement. And then there's a soft iron cage that runs around the movement, making it 25,000 ampere per meter anti-magnetic. Remember, ISO, it's the 764. That's the ISO for an anti-magnetic watch. It specifies resistance to 4,800 ampere per meter. This is 25,000. Now you can see we have the Geneva hallmark on the case as well as the movement, meaning both have met the standards of the Poinçon de Genève, and that's been a feature of the Geneva hallmark since about mid-2012. The rotor is extensively hand-finished, a compass rose design. There's at least 4 different finishes on this 22-carat mass. It is a ceramic bearing winding system, very, very efficient because of those ceramic bearings, and it's a hybrid with a steel race and ceramic balls. Unlubricated, never needs maintenance, never needs replacement. 2 barrels, 60 hours of power reserve, chronometer style 5-position adjustment, and you can see the bevels are excellent, lighting up in the light. The Côte de Genève are deeply laid down by abrasive wheel. All screw heads are black polished with chamfered slots in circumference. We have engine turning on the base plate, satination on the wheels, and locating pegs that are used to help locate bridges on the base plate below. You can see those locating peg heads have been black polished, which is always a nice treatment to see. And the Generation 3 was the first Overseas with a manufacturer movement, a display case back, and the Geneva hallmark. This has got all 3. A very, very special watch, and probably the coolest Overseas I have ever had the chance to share here. Get it while it lasts, because it won't last long. What we have here is a rarity. Only 99 pieces of the FP Journe ruthenium series Octa, Jour, Nuit were ever created. They were made from 2002 through 2005, and of course they featured the combination of solid gold ruthenium-coated dial with ruthenium-coated brass bridges and plates on the movement. But what really sets this one apart is that among the 99, it's the only example I've ever encountered that has the full factory bracelet, and these are $50,000 bracelets in matching platinum. This is a major upcharge option if you pick it up at a Journe boutique, and once upon a time, the owner of this watch decided to step up to the bracelet, which completely changes the presence and the feel of the watch. On the wrist, it's massive. You really feel this. With a gold dial, a platinum case, and a platinum bracelet, the feel of premium heft, it tells you where the money went. If you don't like toy-like watches that are titanium, ceramic, sapphire, too light, this is the antidote. Flat enough that it'll fit underneath the cuff, but broad enough with the solid end links that it looks imposing even on a really big wrist. That's not always the case with 38 and 40 millimeter Journe watches. This is a 40, but with those end links, it's about 54 millimeters across the wrist. So it has a lot of shoulder and a lot of presence. Taking a quick look at the reverse side, I promised you brass bridges and plates. Here you go. The difference is the ruthenium series watches, they did have brass bridges and plates, but they were coated in ruthenium rather than rhodium, so they don't look silver. Automatic winding, 120-hour chronometric, 160-hour de facto power reserve. This is an Eleanor-made case, so it's one of the French-made cases, you know, because you could see the French Eagle hallmark next to the Eleanor maker's mark, but we also have the Swiss hallmark, so we have double hallmarks, Swiss and French. And if you look at the end links, we also have the old style end link with the Eleanor maker's mark and then the French stamps, the two eagles. So these older bracelets are not identical to the newer ones. They have different clasp internal construction, and then the end plates that hold them in place, they are different. You could see that. So don't let anyone tell you that you can just go out and randomly connect a bracelet to a Journe watch and make it whole. People who know what they're looking for are going to make sure that the bracelet at least matches the era of the watch, because externally they all look very similar, but the clasp internals and the end links tell the story. You can see it is the Jour Nuit, so it is night and day. It has a little AM PM indicator. It's not a moon phase, it's a day night. We have ruthenium colored double date discs, quick set for the date. We have the power reserve indicator, 120 hours chronometric, though in fact if you let it run till it stops, it'll run for about 160 hours. And that's always been the case with the Octas. Now, this is a watch that came out, as you see it here, in 2020, a few months after the Odysseus in steel. This is the Odysseus in white gold. Now, it's the same size. It's 40.5 millimeters. It's got a lovely gray dial with coining outboard underneath the hour track. It's 120 meters water resistant, respectably shock tolerant for a Lange, and it has plenty of luminescence, so it's easy to read in the dark. Screw down crown, of course, 120 meters water resistant. Well, some of these watches ship on leather straps. This one's got the factory rubber, so it's ready to take the plunge the second you pick it up. You can also see Lange uses what's known as gray gold in the industry, a homogeneous white gold that's white all the way through and never needs to be rhodium plated. This is the good stuff. Now, there's also a wonderfully subtle system for changing the day and the date. It's called a date-o-matic, and you can see I've got a push register as crisp as a fine column wheel chronograph. You hear it, I feel it, it's very satisfying. You will want to play with this feature. I can change the day, I can change the date, and I have a classic Lange panorama datum with white gold indices and hands to match. The watch does feature hacking seconds. We got a movement that was created. This is the L155, but it's based on the L086. Changes from the 086 include primarily a higher beat rate to make it more suitable for a sports watch and more shock tolerant as a result, and then the extension of the balance cock, which on the 86 is single-sided. You can see now we have two screws, a dual-anchored balance bridge for better shock tolerance. Automatic winding, 50-hour power reserve. It's got bridges and plates made of German silver, which have a golden hue because German silver is actually nickel, copper, and zinc, and the copper gives it that golden tone. We have a combination of blued and black polished screws here. We have a platinum mass, and that will help relative to gold or tungsten, improving the winding efficiency. You can see the bridges are all beveled on their sides. There's engine turning in a couple of different sizes on the base plate. We have a full freehand engraved balance bridge, and then we have a black polished swan's neck fine adjustment mechanism. You can see we have a recessed bolt aerodynamic free-sprung balance for shock tolerance, and glasuta stripes across the bridges, with one golden chaton fixing a pivot jewel. This is always a signature of Lange watches, referencing the pocket watch era of watchmaking in East Germany in the early 20th century and the 19th century. Also, to that end, we have a three-quarter style plate, which is the way it would have been done in the pocket watch era. A beautiful watch that's easy to wear. Comes with a pin buckle, so on-the-fly adjustment, easy to do on the sporting timepiece. We know when you're active, your wrist may expand or contract, so it's nice to have a pin buckle to make some changes. It's a broad watch, no doubt about that. I would actually recommend it for wrists 15 centimeters circumference or up, and you can see it is thin, though. With a domed bezel and a thickness of about 11 millimeters, it will slide underneath the cuff, and the white gold model you see here is a bit dressier than the titanium or the steel models. Nevertheless, don't doubt its sports watch cred. Vacheron makes beautiful things, and they often fly under the radar. Quite a few of you will be seeing this watch for the first time. The original version of this, the Traditionnel Complete Calendar, came out in 2017 in platinum. The white gold model you see here with anthracite dial and white gold case, this came out in 2021. Now it is a lovely nickel anthracite dial with white gold indices that have been micro-faceted. You can see they have blade-like micro-facets on their side. And then we have half-frosted Dauphine hands. When you have Dauphine hands, you know you're looking at a traditionnel and not a patrimony. Taking a quick look, you can see the half-frosting really improves the contrast, and that the outer track with the date, the minutes, and the hours is a little bit darker than the center dial. The disc for the moon phase, the day, and the month are all the same color as the dial, so hooray for that. And the case is 41 millimeters in diameter. On the reverse side, we have a 2460 movement, and you can see automatic winding with Geneva hallmark. It does feature hacking seconds, 4 hertz beat rate, 5 position adjustment, 40-hour power reserve, and a beautifully hand-finished and skeletonized rotor. On the wrist, this has a lot of presence. It's a big watch, make no mistake. I'd even say it wears larger than its size. Eyes on, no measurements. I would say this is a 42 or a 43, but I did measure it at 41, and it is thin enough. It's a big but flat watch, so it will fit underneath the cuff, but I recommend if your wrist is much smaller than mine, you look for a smaller Vacheron. This is for 16 centimeter circumference wrists or larger. I often feel Vacheron doesn't get enough credit for the things it does right, but compared to Vacheron, well, this right here doesn't just fly below the radar, it is below the waves. So Vacheron may as well be Patek Philippe compared to Parmigiani when we talk about the relative publicity and acknowledgement. Now, Michel Parmigiani has been making watches under his own name since 1996. Some of the most elaborate are watches most folks will have never seen, and I will have only encountered 1 or 2 times. This launched in 2013. It was based on a 2011 prototype, I believe, and even that was based on a 18th century, I think roughly 1780, English Varden and Stedman pocket watch that was delivered to Michel Parmigiani for restoration in 1997. This is the Parmigiani Fleurier Oval Pantograph, and it is an oval white lacquer dial with a pantograph style mechanism indicating the hours and minutes. As you can see, pantographs follow a form. So you're familiar with the cable guide above a lot of trains and light rail, following the cables overhead that carry the current. Well, that device that follows the cable is a pantograph, the mechanism that copies a large pattern onto a small dial pattern for Audemars Piguet's Royal Oaks to create the tapisserie design. That is also a pantograph. And so here we have this spectacular expanding and contracting double pantograph design. We have a date with a quickset. We have a beautiful black polished metal cap over the center, power reserve indicator, 8-day manual wind power reserve. It's about 51 millimeters from lug to lug, and it's about 37.5, 38 millimeters from side to side. It's not a thick watch, but Part of the joy of wearing this is that even though you would think over 50 millimeters lug to lug is going to be problematic, the fact that the lugs are broken out separately from the case band means that it wears a little bit more compact. And I could definitely wear this watch and enjoy it on a 16 centimeter circumference wrist. It's not super thick either. It will fit underneath a dress cuff. Also worth mentioning, you can see this is old school case design. This is how you can make a case when you don't have to deliver volume, creating the lugs and the case separately and then welding them together and removing all evidence of the welded seam to create that sharp break between lug and case. Flip it over. Back in the late 90s, the original PF 110 movement was outrageous for its day with 8 days of power reserve from twin mainspring barrels. Well, we're more familiar with extended power reserves in the modern era, but considering the energy-intensive complication and the fact that 8 days remains impressive, this movement is a marvel. Manual wind, you can see it's got 5-position adjustment like a chronometer, beautifully decorated. What steals the show here is the multiplicity of inward angles. Now, I've talked about inward angles. Inward angles occur where two bevels meet and create a sharp crease, so under my finger, or the bridge adjacent to the escapement. Every single one of those is inward, sharp, and beautifully defined, and you will find Geneva hallmark movements that do not have one inward angle. You'll even find Geneva hallmark movements that feature a great deal of mechanical beveling. Here, the beveling is by hand, and the inward angles are so numerous that you have to consciously count them to take account. We have Côte de Genève laid down by a abrasive wheel. You can see we have beveling inside all of the screw and jewel sinks. The screw and jewel sinks here, take a quick look. It's what they call a partridge eye. You have this jewel sink with a mirrored shine around its edge. Now, traditionally, most types of fine finish have functional roots, and creating this well-like crevice around the jewel often helped to contain oil so it wouldn't flow out over the rest of the movement. But today, this treatment on jewel and screw sinks is applied specifically in order to make the movement beautiful. And you can see how seamless the step between the bridge and the access panel is. That's absolutely gorgeous and difficult to do. All screw heads are black polished, so is the swan's neck. There's engine turning on the base plate, and some of the wheels are even internally beveled, which is a rare treat to behold. You'll also note that the movement is properly sized and shaped for the case. This is one of the most special watches I've ever encountered. It is truly different from anything else I've ever reviewed, except the one other Parmigiani Pantograph Oval that I've encountered. This is as good as it gets. And remember, Parmigiani makes every part of the watch. And Parmigiani watches, because Hermes is a stakeholder, they come with buttery smooth Hermes leather straps. It is Independent Brand Day here on Weekend Watches, and this is a very rare piece. Don't blink. This isn't what you think it is. It's not a salmon dial. I've featured the DB27 Titan Hawk from Bethune before. I featured the Titan Hawk V1, which has a date, and the Titan Hawk V2, which has constant seconds. But I've featured the V2 with its salmon dial. This is actually a champagne dial, something that is very recent and rare. You can see the dial has several different focal planes and outstanding depth. The hands are blackened in matte black and gloss black, and you can see that microlight reductive engraving has been used with 3 panels on the dial. The microlight is also used to engrave the case. So Denis Flageolet, who's the watchmaker and creative lead at Bethune, he doesn't believe that traditional rosette guilloche works on every type of watch, and with something this modern, I agree with him. So you have this microlight. It's still reductive, it's not stamped, but it's a different look. It's more subtle. It's a micro texturing. On the reverse, you have the Auto V2 movement. Everything you see that's blue is fire-blued titanium that has been itself engraved with microlight. We have a spectacular snailing across the bridge over the barrel and the train, as well as the mass outboard. Look at the length of the lever arm. Tremendous mechanical advantage and winding efficiency here. 60-hour power reserve, braced against shock by a full dual-anchored balance bridge. The watch is full of patents. The hairspring is 2 pieces bent by hand and clamped together. flat and shock resistant like a flat hairspring, but breathing concentrically like an overcoil. Out of view, a proprietary design, a low lubrication, low friction silicone escape wheel, and Bethune's 2016 patent balance wheel. Fired blue titanium wheel with white gold masses in the rim, less susceptible to changes in temperature, to shock, and aerodynamic drag because of the recession of the bolts in the rim and the masses in the rim where it does the most good for timekeeping. All of this designed beautifully. Remember, the Titan Hawk V1 did not have a display case back. This is the Titan Hawk V2 that came out in 2018. It does have a display case back. The watch is nice and thin, under 12 millimeters thick, 43 millimeters in diameter, in grade 5 tie, which is more scratch resistant than steel, but also lighter, and of course it's hypoallergenic. Variable geometry floating lugs, an iconic de Bethune innovation first introduced in 2008 on the DB26 perpetual calendar. It became legendary on the DB28 model, which won the Aiguille at the GPHG in 2011, and the Titan Hawk has that same wonderfully ergonomic system of collapsible floating lugs. So let me show you how this system works on the wrist. Variable geometry, it conforms to your wrist. Now this is the small lug span, so I believe these are about 51 millimeters to 47, depending on how you compress them. This works well on a wrist as small as 14 centimeters circumference, and that's not the case with all DB27s. These short lugs are the ones you want if you've got a smaller wrist like mine, or even a smaller wrist. A very special watch, redolent of independent watchmaking, savoir-faire, and invention. But then again, the indie scene has pioneers, and while Denis was one of the first back in 2002, the same year, Peter Speake-Marin, AHCI member and British master watchmaker, created his eponymous company. Speake-Marin was started in 2002. Peter brought his first watches to Basel in 2003. The model you see here came out in a limited edition back in 2005 when Peter was still very much the creative head of the brand and creating the watches. 38 millimeters in diameter in the Piccadilly case. You can see this is really low volume watch creation. Back then, Speake-Marin was making about 150 to 200 watches a year, and when you're operating on that volume, you can do these spectacular hand-assembled cases with welded lugs. You can also see that the dial features, and we are talking about the dial proper with the hours and minutes, it features a combination of satination and chiseling, and the whole dial disc is made of solid gold. We have satination on the bridges beneath, and you can see the bridge for the tourbillon, black polished all the way across, mirror beveled on its edges. We have sharp outward points where bevels converge. The capstone to the tourbillon on each side is actually a brilliant cut diamond. On the reverse side, you can see two power reserve indicators with serpentine indications. So one handles hours 0 through about 55, and the other handles 55 through 110. Two mainspring barrels, manual wind. It is a 110-hour power reserve. This is called the Vintage Tourbillon. It is serial 1 of 10. These were very low-volume watches. The finishing quality here is self-evident. I don't need to sing its praises. You can see what you're getting. But note some of the elements that were used unconventionally, like black polishing across the entire tourbillon bridge, like satination instead of Côte de Genève on the bridges of the movement, like the use of golden chaton fixed by screws and nod to the pocket watch era. Peter Speake-Marin got his start in restoration, so he would have had a lot of experience with pocket watches that featured things like three-quarter style bridges or jewels set in chaton or serpentine indications. Now there's another power reserve indicator on the dial, and as the watch, I'll wind it so you can see it change color, as the watch hits 25 hours remaining, the indication will turn from red to anthracite. So when you see that little red indication, it means you have about 1 day left, 25 hours. Now, if you look closely, this is actually the STT 1375 tourbillon movement, exquisitely elaborated by Peter Speake-Marin. If you go and you check out the STT, which evolved out of the prior Progress watch, you will find that the architecture of the train and the power reserve are the same. So in terms of where the barrels are and where the drivetrain pivots are, it's the same on the STT. But you also note that the decoration and the bridge style is nothing like the Speake-Marin. In the early days, Peter Speake-Marin created this movement for himself. He also created a version of it on the Harry Winston X-Center Tourbillon of 2005, and you'll also see the Peter Speake-Marin modified tourbillon on other Harry Winston Ocean series and limited run watches outside of the Opus collection, but he really made it his own with the revision of the architecture of the bridges. If you see the STT, it's got this dog bone design. Peter created a much more elegant setup and finished it to the state of the art. I like the tradition of établissage. I think it's kind of fun that you can trace the lineage of this movement across brands while still wearing a very distinctive high grade of it exclusive to Speake-Marin. Again, 10 pieces of this watch made back in 2005. 38mm case. This one actually wears really nice on a small wrist. Here's a larger watch from an indie. We love Romain Gauthier, and while the sports watches he's launched recently aren't necessarily to my preference, the HMs, the HMS, the Prestige, Micro Rotor, and of course the Logical One are the Romain Gauthier we picture in our dreams. So the Logical One launched in 2013. It won the GPHG Men's Complication Prize, discontinued for 2021. This is a great example of the model with a Grand Faux enamel set of dials inside a white gold case that's 43mm in diameter, 52.7 from lug to lug. Look at the contouring of these lugs and the way they've been grafted onto the case, then evacuated and media blasted to create a sharp distinction and finish. You can also see we have a concave bezel here. This crown sets the time. This button is actually used to wind the watch, and you can see how it has a stop works, so it stops immediately when it's no longer keeping good time, and the first push of the winding trigger started the balance in the escapement. Wind it up all the way with the push button trigger and you get 46 hours of power reserve. There's a power reserve indicator on the back to track that, or you can look at the coiled mainspring inside of its barrel. The inside of the barrel is lined in sapphire, and so you can actually see there's a sapphire cap over the coil. This is to reduce the friction of the mainspring inside the barrel. All sorts of things Romain Gauthier, who is an engineer, not a watchmaker, thought of to make his watches mechanically unique, which is why he uses things like a 4 hertz beat rate rather than the slower beat rate you see on other indies. It's why he makes his own wheels. He has his own free-sprung balance design, and then you can see that he's reimagined the fusee and chain. So you have the wheel that's connected to the barrel right here, and then you have this snail cam that varies the diameter being pulled by the chain. So initially, when it has a lot of wind and a lot of torque, it pulls a smaller diameter of the snail cam, and as the mainspring barrel torque wears down, this snail cam extends, creating a larger effective lever arm, improving the mechanical advantage for the barrel, and ensuring that even as the barrel loses torque, the force being applied to the escapement remains absolutely constant, and then there's a stop works, so it will stop running rather than keep bad time. This doesn't just reduce the friction in the fusee and chain because it has fewer parts, it also keeps the chain in the same plane as it moves from the fusee snail cam over to the barrel wheel, and you can see that everything here has been immaculately hand finished to standards that are self-evident. I need not describe how beautifully this steel bridge has been executed, nor do I need to tell you that all of these links and their pins have been black polished, or that there are 26 ruby jewels sitting inside the chain alone to reduce its friction. Flip it all over, more interior angles, and of a quality that basically no one surpasses. Because he was an MBA, a businessman, and an engineer, Romain Gauthier was not a watchmaker by trade. He focused on other aspects of the business, so he drew his inspiration from the best watchmakers in the Vallée du Jour, specifically his good friend Philippe Dufour, which is why he made his bridges thicker so that the bevels could be drawn out wider, and why he uses elaborate sharp inward creases everywhere, but also sharp outward points where bevels come to a point, and that on steel parts on both sides of the watch. You can see that there's solarization, there's beveling, there's satination, there's also media blast on the bridges and plates. You can see that there's media blast across the bridges, and then you can see that the bevels are a mile wide, so these are double finished bridges. You can also see that the sinks for the jewels are beautifully partridge-eyed, that is to say beveled internally, and then we also have special screws used on both the case and the movement. The idea is we'll first keep idiots from opening lowering up the case, but also allow more torque to be applied to the screw without rounding it off. And you can do that with this design, which Gauthier created, than you can with a flathead. So it's full of unconventional thinking, and it's made of gray gold, which is white gold that never needs to be rhodium plated. Really very special. You do need a big wrist for it, so my wrist or larger. You're going to want a 16 centimeter circumference wrist or larger to wear this watch, but as good as it gets. I would compare this favorably to the likes of Lange und Heine, Grubel Forsey, Philippe Dufour, Ferdinand Berthoud. The best finishing in the world compares favorably to this, and it compares favorably to them. If that's not the last watch, what on earth could be? I like to finish with the most impressive piece, and today it's a monster. Created back in 2006, this is the Jaeger-LeCoultre Reverso Grande Complication, a triptyque. Not one, not two, but within its locking case, 3 dials. And yes, it has a case lock, because it's so massive in platinum that the case could fly open without this locking mechanism. Here, we have an instantaneous jumping French language perpetual calendar with a retrograde date. The calendar module is only 1.7 millimeters thick, so it fits inside the case back. A 75-piece limited edition, my lucky number 13. And you could see Ascona. This one is cammed for a place in Ticino, or southern Italian-speaking Switzerland, and it is cammed to demonstrate the sunrise and the sunset time in that location. It can always be reprogrammed, but as with engravings on old pocket watches, I like to preserve the camming of sunrise and sunset systems to reflect the original owner. We have a zodiac calendar, a star chart, sidereal time. We have an equation of time to show the difference between mean solar time and true solar time. We have guilloche, real guilloche, not the stamped kind, all over this case back. The watch features the perpetual calendar. It features a power reserve indicator. It's a quantized power reserve indicator, 48-hour manual wind power reserve. As you wind it, it suddenly jumps to 1. You wind, and it jumps to 2. And as it discharges, it jumps down from 2 to 1 to 0. It has a unique ellipse isometer escapement, which is a full silicon, that is rare for JLC, a full silicon unlubricated escapement that is single direct impulse like a marine chronometer detent escapement. So this works like that, with the escape wheel impulsing the roller jewel on the balance in one direction only, solely in its direction of travel. 21,600 vibrations per hour. You can see that it acts as the seconds hand for the watch. This ellipse isometer escapement was only ever used in the triptyque, and it is exclusive to the model. It is a historical engineering landmark for JLC and super exclusive. The only example I know of in the modern era of JLC creating a chronometer-style single direct impulse escapement on one of its watches. Now, of course, we do have this case lock system. You lock it in place so the watch can't flop open. 18 millimeters thick, 54.5 millimeters lug to lug, and about 37.8 millimeters across. You better believe this thing is big. I'm going to throw it on my wrist, and you can get a sense of what was, back in 2006, the largest reverso ever created. It was recognized at the GPHG. It is huge. You need an 18 centimeter circumference wrist to wear this, and no cuff could ever surmount Mount Triptyque, which is made of solid platinum. Very rare. There was subsequently a series made in white gold, but the population of these watches in the world numbers dozens, not hundreds. They are incredibly exclusive, and thank God it comes with a full deployant clasp to prevent it from dropping off your wrist. You can see on the back, it's been cambered a little bit. It has this lovely satin finish with the individual engraving, and this movement has gone through the Master 1000 Hours Control, a test of the water resistance, durability, power reserve, and chronometry of this extraordinary grand complication 18-function triple dial JLC watch. There's a day-night indicator, so you know when to close the case, and that's important because the instantaneous change perpetual calendar depends on a little pusher system that jumps out of the main case to instantaneously toggle the change at midnight. So if you don't have the case closed, the perpetual calendar doesn't advance. That's why you want to know where you are, so at nighttime you can close your case, preferably lock it in place, and then let the instantaneous jump calendar do its thing. So when you open it in the morning, you're going to get the correct calendar and the correct moon phase. The finishing on the tourbillon carriage is the only part of the movement you can see, but it is also finished to the standards you would expect from Holy Trinity and above, a watch that exhausts superlative and likely the muscles in your arm. You can also see real guilloche using both rose lathe and straight line machines, both reductive engines used on this dial. Reach out to Team Mosso at thewatchbox.com for purchase and pricing details.